Today on the podcast, I want to talk about a phase of growth that took me a long time and a lot of work to really embrace. And I want to talk about how doing this work specifically is probably the reason my relationship has been able to evolve past a phase that for a lot of couples leads to breakups and divorce. In this episode, we're going to talk about the niceness trap that many men today are struggling with. We're going to give some background as to why this might be happening, why it tends to kill so many relationships, and what to do about it if you recognize that this is a pattern in your own life and relationships too. This is a really important episode, and one that might save you from making the mistakes that I and so many other men like me have made in an intimate relationship. And also, this episode might help you bring out the kind of magnetism and attraction inside of your relationship that is way beyond anything you might have experienced up to now. Interested? Stay with me. This is Reclaiming the Gentleman. I'm Dave Lashansky. Growing up, I think the number one descriptor people used when talking about me was niceness. I remember a friend once told me that in a class that they were in high school, I wasn't in this class, but my name came up. And I was unanimously agreed upon as the nicest guy in school. Now, I remember this for a few reasons, partly because I love that people were talking about me in this way. It was sweet and totally unexpected. It caught me by surprise. But I also remember it because there was a part of me that wanted to scream. And back then, I couldn't really explain why, but I hated being called nice. I think that deep down, I knew niceness for what it really is. I think that deep down, I saw niceness as inauthentic, incomplete, impersonal. But really, I think I saw niceness as being conspicuously average. And now I understand what was behind that hunch, behind that dislike of being called nice. And that's because choosing to lean in and grow inside of my romantic partnership has shown me how my niceness was actually a trauma response. It was a fawning response. Because I, for almost all of my life, have used niceness as armor. Armor that protects me from harm, from judgment, from humiliation, from blame. Because if I'm such a nice guy, who'd want to bully me? Who'd want to humiliate me? If I'm seen as a nice guy by others, who would want to hold me accountable if I made a mistake? Who could say anything unkind about me? This is the logic behind this unconscious, automatic response of niceness. I often talk about this as being a people pleaser. It's kind of the same thing. And in my romantic relationship in particular, I have used niceness as a way to skew the ledger in my favor. I was conspicuously being so nice, bending over backward to always be helpful and good so that I had something I could point to if she wanted to call me higher. I was banking as many brownie points as I possibly could, almost automatically, like a default setting in my behavior, because I was so terrified of screwing up and having to face the consequences of screwing up. And really, I was really scared of letting her down, of not being good enough. Now, some of you might be listening to this, nodding along and seeing yourself in my story or seeing your partner in this. And I think it's important to mention here that this tactic that I was using, this tactic of niceness, is one of the most common ways that men manipulate their partners. And that word manipulate might sound like a harsh one. But I want to make clear that this is not meant as a judgment. This is actually meant as a reality check. Because while there are men out there that use far more overt and harmful manipulation tools, this is one that often flies under the radar for men. And it's one that usually causes a ton of these kinds of feelings. Feelings like, I do everything and she never appreciates it. I work so hard and there's nothing I can do to win. I can never win. I'm never enough for her. Sometimes it's, she gets so mean when she's mad at me. And I think more often than most of us realize, the anger that comes through from our partners, the frustration, the impossible situations that so many men feel like they're in their partnership is the result of this nice guy thing. Now, if you're doing the nice guy performance in your relationship, I want you to see it for what it is. I want you to see it as armor. I want you to see it as armor because most likely you were raised to be this way. You learned that being nice made women feel safe, made it so women would open up around you, made you special, made you one of the good guys. Niceness absolved you of the harms that the men that came before you perpetuated. And if you're doing the nice guy performance, you're going to confront some serious problems in your most intimate relationships. Because niceness doesn't cut it in intimacy. Niceness is a way for us to pose as connected to our heart. But the problem is it doesn't hold any space for the bearer to be in his anger, in his raw, primal body, in the truest expression of his heart. Those are the things that intimacy and romantic partnership need from us. They need access beyond that armor. And to do that, you need to learn to meet the child that is holding that shield of niceness. And you need to learn how to show that child how to hold his boundaries, how to live in a world of imperfect people who'll take advantage of your niceness, who might even harm you for your niceness. This is actually how I woke up to all the ways that being nice was affecting my relationship. Now, there were a series of moments where, with my fiancée, Vanna, I defaulted to niceness and encounters in the world, and in the process let her and us be run over. I let her get hurt. I let myself get taken advantage of. There was one time, for instance, I let a neighbor into and through our space because that's what I believed, that's what I was taught nice neighbors do. But before I even let him in, he was acting weird. He was being insulting and cagey. It was hard to really understand where he was coming from or why he was talking to us, and neither of us really liked this guy. And we definitely didn't want him anywhere near us or our business, but out of my default setting of niceness, I let him tour the place. And afterward, we both felt really violated and insulted and uncomfortable. And I realized with so much shame in that moment how I'd completely checked out of my body from start to finish in that encounter. And I realized that I was so concerned with being considered to be a nice neighbor that I didn't think about the impact it would have on Vanna. And I didn't think about how I would feel having let this person be near me, be able to talk to me in this way. And I see that this is what happens in so many relationships, where one partner's default setting of pleasing people creates wounds and unsafety in the relationship. And how instead of confronting that mistake, instead of sitting in the shame it creates and recognizing and investigating why we throw our intuitive senses out the window and open ourselves up to danger or hurt, I see how often we default to assuming that we're being too sensitive, or we blame our partners for being too sensitive, for needing too much, where really a simple and loving protective boundary, a boundary like don't let people who are insulting you and making you feel uncomfortable into your space, could have created such a better outcome, could have created closeness and safety. It's just so much easier to ignore the ways that we can grow in relationship, especially if we feel justified by all our other efforts, by how hard we work, if we have this mountain of evidence with how good we are, how much we keep up with around the house, how nice we are, even when it's hard. This is the manipulation. And it's why it's such a compounding feedback loop. Because the more we feel uncomfortable with the parts of us like our anger, or the parts of us that want to be protective of our home, the easier it is to default to niceness and use it as justification for why it is so unfair that your partner is mad at your mistakes. And I want to say that again because it's really important here. It's really the crux of this episode. The more uncomfortable you are with your anger or your protective instincts, the easier it is to default to niceness and use it as a justification for why your partner doesn't deserve to be mad at your mistakes. So if you're listening to this and you're seeing your own patterns shine through, if you're recognizing the ways that you're letting your need to be considered nice, your need to please others, rule your behavior, I want you to consider the following as a way to bring more presence and choice to the ways you are acting and relating. And I want you to start with this. What does your heart really sound like? We often convince ourselves that niceness is a heart-forward way of being, but it's actually a protective way of being. Niceness starts and ends in our head. It's an adaptive trauma response. It is not an authentic expression of who we are, of our kindness. So what would that authentic expression be? There is such a distinction between niceness and kindness, just in those words and all the connotations around them. There's even this built-in distinction for us, because we have an expression that conveys kindness's connection to the heart, right? Kind-hearted. There's no nice-hearted. It's not a thing. So think about this. How would the kind-hearted version of you respond differently than the one who's concerned with being seen as nice? And here's another inquiry. What are the things that your niceness finds unacceptable in yourself and in others? What are the ways of being that you consider out of line or inappropriate? This is important because niceness often also comes with a lot of projection, where what we deem to be unacceptable in ourselves, in our behavior, we start to judge in others. And these projections usually don't come out overtly, but often they show up as contemptuousness or holding ourselves above others as holier than thou. Sometimes it comes out as just being super self-abusive if we sense even the slightest hint of that kind of excess presence that can't be deemed as nice in the ways we've been acting. And this pattern of projection harms the people closest to us as much as it does ourselves. And that's especially true in romantic relationships. So don't skimp here. What kinds of ways of being are unacceptable to your people-pleasing self? What's unacceptable to you? Is it self-admiration? confidence? Maybe it's terseness or stern words. Is it honesty that has some bite to it? Maybe it's cutting off a conversation with a neighbor who's walking all over you. And the point here is that whatever shows up for you is valuable information. Some of what is going to be unacceptable to your nice guy persona is going to be part of your authentic self-expression. It's going to need to be reclaimed by you. Niceness for me often looked like humility. I've talked about this in the podcast. It was a humility that made no space for me to be good or talented or of high caliber at almost anything. It looked like me casting myself as having zero meaningful needs, and therefore no discernible self or presence. Your authenticity starts at the edges of your niceness, at the places where you take up some space, where you deign to exist without the need for brevity and without scooching over to make room for someone else. Find those edges and nurture them like crazy. Become the kind-hearted human you were born to be, and let those fires burn away the walls that your niceness has built around your heart. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Reclaiming the Gentleman. This show expounds on a lot of the ideas that I go over in the 21-day program, Reclaiming the Gentleman. That program is a crash course in so many of the topics that we just start to touch upon in this podcast. And the idea in that program is for men to really take charge, have agency in their own lives to make more conscious choices for how they show up in their relationship. I think usually we wait for things to get really bad before asking for help, before joining a program like that one. And it was designed for guys who are going through that. But even if in your relationship you're not feeling like things are all that bad, but you have a sense that things could get better, you're right in that sweet spot. You're right in that place where I think growth is knocking at the door. And when you open that door, when you really go for it, the way that I did in my relationship, the way that I help all of my clients do it, and the way that I really intend participants in Reclaiming the Gentleman to do, what happens is you open up a completely new universe of intimacy. You open yourself to the greatest treasures that relationship has to offer. And those don't go away. They don't diminish over time. They continue to evolve. There is this myth in our culture that intimacy dies after the first few months or years, once the honeymoon phase is over, right? But the truth is that intimacy, when approached with a growth mindset, when approached with an open heart, is an infinite universe of powerful, deep, awe-inspiring, life-affirming, and totally fulfilling experiences. And if that's something you're curious about, sign up for Reclaiming the Gentleman. Right now, our priority waitlist is open. You can go to davelashansky.com to be one of the first to know when we go live. We'll also be holding a free workshop before the start of Reclaiming the Gentleman for you to kind of get a sense of what's going to happen inside that space and to kind of kickstart the whole process. It's going to be really fun. More information's coming soon, but it'll happen sometime in September. So stay tuned. Keep listening. Keep your eyes in this space. As always, this episode has been produced by myself through my production company, David Benjamin Sound, LLC. If you or someone you know or your company is interested in creating a branded podcast, check us out, davidbenjaminsound.com. We hold monthly workshops on creating a high-quality branded podcast that actually serves your business. That's all for today. I am, again, so grateful for your ears. Thank you for listening. Please stay tuned. Sign up. I hope this episode really serves you in seeing some of those patterns and helping you transform them. I will see you in a week.